All right, Carson, how frequently do you read emails from top to bottom?
I'm going to say almost never.
Okay, well, that is reassuring for me to hear because I am sincerely, wholeheartedly delighted and honored that on Tuesday, August 19th, I received multiple emails from both free weekly readers and subscribers at Rhythm Changes who said, "Where's my Rhythm Changes?" and reached out to me on Tuesday morning, which legitimately was very touching. And also, they didn't read the tops even of any emails for the last couple of weeks if they were reaching out about that. But if that's you, I'm honored.
That's very funny. That's a funny delta of people who really want to see the message in their inbox but did not read the previous emails.
But didn't read.
They really are kind of skipping the headers and the peripheral. They want the meat and potatoes. They want the gig list.
Yeah, they would just skip right down. It's not even TLDR. It's just like DR.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious. But I think that's a huge compliment that people are accustomed to it and missing it.
I do too. I'm feeling it here at the end of summer. Like I've had a pretty decent time, even though I went camping in the rain. How are you feeling at this moment?
I'm feeling also pretty good. End of summer. I think we got a little more sunshine in us left, and I'm trying to make the most of it.
Good. And we're trying to make the most of some of the stories that have come up. We've got a few of them for you today. We're each bringing something to the table. We're recording pretty close to upload time this time, unlike some other recent ones. So if you don't mind, I could throw it over to you and we can catch up with our friends at Subvert, who we devoted a whole episode to. You put in an update that you saw from their blog and their documentation about something they're doing. So what are they doing over at Subvert?
So I think there's actually two things. One of them I forgot to put down, which happened earlier, maybe right after we first talked about them. Subvert, for a recap, if you did not listen to our episode about that platform, is kind of a Bandcamp alternative, is what they're positioning themselves as. They have their own reasons for why they think we need a Bandcamp alternative, but they really want to do things differently, and they're kind of in the process of building this platform for music sharing and music it's a artist-owned cooperative that operates like Bandcamp. So the first thing that happened right after we recorded is they put out a notice to the members of the cooperative, of which I am now one, as well as other folks, to say that the cooperative had lost a very large investor that they were kind of counting on, because the kind of terms of that investment had been altered a little bit, in that the investor was requesting a board seat, which I think kind of in Subvert's almost like constitution, they had said they will not give away board seats to investors, which is a very common practice in tech.
Giving them away is a very common practice. Yeah, refusing to is not.
Sure, yeah. Giving them away would be,
Yeah.
It's a very normal for an investor to expect, especially with, I think the number they said was a $200 million, $200,000. $200 million would be crazy. Must have been 200K.
They could buy Bandcamp.
Yeah, $200,000 investment. And had kind of lost that because that investor expected a board seat in return, which again would be a very normal thing for an investor in a normal tech platform to expect. So I thought that was interesting. It was a very principled stance. I mean, you could see that going the other way, that like even before launch, Subvert could have sort of begun to wiggle out of some of its commitments it made as they realized that they were maybe a little impractical. That's a lot of money to lose. And that represented a fairly large percentage of the capital they were expecting at launch. So I think we talked about that a little bit. I think we both feel like I wouldn't have faulted them for giving a board seat to a very large investor like that. I think that's maybe just playing the game, but I don't know if you have other additional thoughts about that.
There are a few things that we've been talking about lately, and we might get to at least one more, that are in this camp of like, we're going to Leroy Jenkins like all the way towards the most principled outcome because we think the financials are going to work out even better if we do that. Like the thing about the Guelph Jazz Festival going all free that we talked about last episode is like that. Again, we may come to another thing that I also view in that light. And this could be something like that, because there could be something else under the surface where they are pretty confident that somebody else will give them a lot more money and they don't want to give it up too soon. That is the most generous explanation I can think of why you wouldn't do it, because this founder, who, you know, I'm not personally connected to at the moment, but I've known him for a few years because of my history with his previous venture, Ampled, in the co-op musician space. You know, he understands very well, as you and I have discussed, what happens when you don't have the capital that you need. And so it can have been easy to turn this down, but my speculation would be that maybe they think that something a lot bigger is not far away. And if they have enough runway to get there, then they wouldn't want to ditch one of their principles before they got there.
Totally. Yeah. I thought it was a cool move. They were very transparent about it. I think I was happy to see that as well in cooperative. That I think one of your points and one of the other points about Ampled was like, there were decisions being made that didn't feel like maybe everyone in the cooperative was like really in the know about stuff that's pretty critical. And so, you know, this was just like, hey, this is kind of in our constitution. This is how we said we're going to operate. This is the decision we're making because that's how we said we're going to operate. And so I would say thumbs up for being ethical that way, as far as at the outset, sticking to your guns. And maybe to that point of who knows if this will just work out, because it's kind of a weird bet. I think what a lot of institutions or new, you know, existing and new institutions are realizing that the old playbooks are kind of out the window at the moment, right? With the Jazz Fest, Guelph Jazz Fest being like, well, let's just make it free. Like, who knows what'll happen? Maybe reprioritizing a little bit, maybe changing your incentives and your horizons a little bit for thinking of like, okay, it's $200,000 right now worth whatever we lose, you know, if that's either respect to the community or if that's, you know, changing the constitution of the thing. So I think while on the surface, it's maybe like, you might look at that and say like, I mean, 200 grand's 200 grand and a board seat's like not crazy. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was principled. And then that board proceeded to do something interesting as well, which might not have happened if they had given this kind of investor a seat on the board, which is just today. We're recording on August 20th. They announced that they were going to 0% platform fees. So Bandcamp takes, I think, 5 or 7% or something of sales. Do you know the number?
15, and then after you get past the volume, then it's 10. And it might be 10 for merch at like a lower threshold or whatever. It's either 10 or 15. And then for Subvert also, this means they will never charge a platform fee, because at launch they are not going to have one. Is this decision, right?
Yeah. So they had originally kind of planned to have some platform fees to support obviously the continued growth and development of the platform. They're going to a pay what you can model, basically, sort of like an opt-in at checkout. Hey, if you want to keep this thing going, you have the option to add, 10%, 15%. Kind of, they've got a blog post maybe which we can link in the show notes.
Yeah, I also just realized I shouldn't say they never will, and maybe you'll address that too. Sure. But I noticed something about that too. But they intend to not charge a platform fee.
Yeah, they have some language in the post about that, like they're going to monitor if this works or not, right? They're going to be measuring success. They're not just making this blindly and hoping. I saw that and I thought that was cool. They do say there's an example, I think, to quiet the naysayers who are probably immediately about to be like, that's really dumb before you have a product. GoFundMe is their other example, which did this, I guess. GoFundMe went from, I think, maybe that was where I was getting the 7% number. I think like 5 or 7% to pay what you want. Or it was 5% to pay what you want. Now they average 7.5% because people, when prompted to the option to give a little more or a little less, sometimes it actually averages out a little bit higher, which I always think of as like the Radiohead, like the In Rainbows effect, where the pay what you can worked out to be like their best, most profitable album because there was just like a true pay what you can. I don't know if they did that on Bandcamp or on their own site, and Bandcamp
didn't exist yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, this is pre-Bandcamp. Yeah, so this was, yeah, they just did pay what you can, and they made way more money on that record than on other releases, because if you give someone, you have like patronage as an option. Basically, someone might choose to pay like $90 for the album because they like what you're doing, and I think you've got some of those good Samaritans that kind of balance out people who might say, okay, I would rather not pay an extra 10% on this album that I'm buying, and opt for zero or less than what the platform fee you might hope to get. So it's a gamble. I think it's neat to see. It kind of relates to something maybe going to talk about later, which is like, I think there's a very small but not zero subset of Bandcamp artists who don't like that there's a platform fee on Bandcamp. That is a reason, that's a differentiating factor that Subvert will have, to not have a platform fee, because there are people who are just like either ethically or just opposed to the platform that they're delivering their music on taking a cut. I would have some arguments with those people, but like, I think it's smart of Subvert to like set themselves apart. Like, hey, you don't want a platform fee, is great. We won't take a cut. You got to rely on your buyers to support the platform.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts overall. I guess one of them is Bandcamp still also charges a payment fee, and you got to imagine that Subvert will still have a payment fee involved, and so it won't be true 100%. Just like on Bandcamp Fridays, it isn't technically true that 100% of your money goes to the artist, because 100% of your money basically never goes anywhere without a payment fee of 2.9% plus 30 cents or whatever. There is actually an exception that I'm thinking of, which is, have you heard of this platform called Zephy?
Zephy, no.
Yeah, Zephy is a Canadian startup. It is funded by donors, and it charges no fee. It offers no fee ticket selling and marketing services to only nonprofits. So one of my clients, in the Cellar Music umbrella, there's a nonprofit called the Vancouver Jazz Orchestra Society, and it sells its tickets on Zephy with zero fees. And there really are zero fees. It processes the payouts directly, and that's possible because Zephy is like a Montreal-based Canadian nonprofit in and of itself, I think, or maybe it's a B Corp or something like that. But they have private funding that allows them to do that for now. Don't know how long that goes, but saw that was interesting to throw out that there is at least one platform where 100% of your money does actually go through. But, usually there's at least a payment fee, right?
Are the Bandcamp payment fees, you're just talking about like when PayPal pays those out, or does Bandcamp charge a payment fee to get the money to you on top of what PayPal takes?
About PayPal. Bandcamp is actually, I have heard, I will say, because I don't know where they're at and how they're rolling out the communications, but I have heard that Bandcamp may be switching to Stripe instead of PayPal, which would be a big deal, which could be welcomed by a lot of users, because Stripe has a pretty sterling reputation in the circles that we tend to run in. And that would be big news, because Bandcamp has been joined at the hip with PayPal for its entire 18-year or whatever existence at this point. So that would be interesting too.
That would be, and I wonder if Bandcamp is feeling any of that pinch, right? As artists are calling, there's like even more scrutiny on Bandcamp with, the union stuff we talked about. We kind of in our Subvert episode, we talked a little bit about some of the reasons people aren't thrilled with Bandcamp. PayPal is one of those that you have to get your money through PayPal, and obviously PayPal is has a checkered past, and it's a too much to get into here, but people might feel strongly about not wanting to get their money from PayPal and not wanting to give interchange fees to PayPal.
Yeah. And then my two other thoughts that are actually about the Subvert situation quickly, I guess, are one, I have come to realize how big the vibe economics factor is, like how much people like Bandcamp Friday for the symbolism of the 100%, regardless of how many actual dollars it actually is. Even as a small amount of dollars, the vibe of the gesture is big. The talk about pay per stream and switching which platform you use because it pays more and all that nonsense, but people feel good about it. The vibe economics of being able to say that you don't charge this fee as a marketing decision is much probably more important, I would say, than whatever the economic results of it end up being. And my main criticism of Subvert was that they don't know how to go to market yet, or at least they haven't shown what they're going to do. And I'm talking about like the actual users as opposed to like onboarding the artists.
Yeah.
They'll get the people who are interested in this kind of vibe economics the more they can say things like this, regardless of how significant they are. That's one. And then the other one that I'll just note for the artists out there, if you're listening and you're an artist, I have fallen into this trap too. And so I'm wondering if you do as well. And, maybe I would caution against it a little bit, which is, I think, as a small player in the world out here, it is pretty easy to, especially if you're a nerd like me, to get caught up in margin and like unit economics and be like, oh, this platform lets me keep more cents on the dollar of every dollar, when really it's like, for 99.9% of us, margin isn't what we should be thinking about. It is about volume, and it is about where you go, like how many actual dollars there are in total as opposed to how many you keep. I think I have come to believe this on a lot of different levels. The more that I've worked with labels, the more that I've had to concede that this is true and kind of alter something that I showed up at the table with, in terms of like, I thought margin was like the most important thing, but really it's not. It's not a big deal in the beginning. You need to actually get to a certain scale before you worry about margin too much. Otherwise, you won't have very much income to worry about. And so that's the flip side of it, I guess, is I guess if you linked up those 2 points, it'd be like, I don't think any artist would be well served to like join Subvert because of the unit economics of this plan.
Yeah.
But I think that the marketing vibes of it will be probably useful to them.
Yes. I think, as both the decision about the board seat and this move is kind of positioning Subvert as though like more, I mean, it was already there because it was a cooperative, but even like sort of more left fields, artist friendly, experimental, both in its structure and its the decisions it's making, and will attract a certain type of music consumer. I think that's a type of music consumer that's very niche, and we'll see how that goes for Subvert. But I think they're like getting kind of their positioning nailed down, and it looks interesting as someone who's nerdy about this, but I don't know how much broad appeal it's going to have.
And if I just accidentally divulged confidential information about Bandcamp, then that's hilarious. But I don't think so about them switching payment providers.
I heard something about that, but I wasn't sure what the actual. I'm sure many Bandcamp users and customers would love for them to switch. So that's Subvert. I think we're going to keep on as time goes on. I think it's a little while before that platform is available for end users to use. But it sounds like they're getting closer. So we'll keep on doing updates. You have something for us down in Denton, Texas. What's going on?
Okay, so here we go. This goes back a few episodes now. I'm thinking of like the jazz memes versus Patrick Bartley thing. So this story comes to my feed out of Rubber Gloves Rehearsal Studio, which, obviously I've never been to because it's in North Texas, but I am guessing that if you're familiar, Carson, with Bully's Studios in New West, or at least you've heard of it, I'm guessing it's probably a similar place to that. They actually have their own struggles that they're going through this year, and they might be an interesting interview. So I'm going to flag that for now. But, Bully Studios has been like a rock and metal institution in downtown New Westminster, my home city, and they have rehearsal rooms, and they also present shows there. So I think this is a similar kind of DIY space.
Got it.
Okay, so on August 14th, they made a post announcing something that they called AI Music Night, scheduled for September 9th. And the text of their post just said, at least this is what they've edited it to, if they have indeed changed it, but if they haven't, this is what they said. September 9, AI Music Night with Paul Slavens. Join Paul as he holds AI court. Maybe there will be a riot. Open forum for music, quote, music, unquote, and discussion. This event description was not written by AI. Now, Paul Slavens is like a lifer in the local scene, apparently, and he's a radio host and touring pro musician. And just on the face of it, if I'm like, what was the intent of this? We'll get to what people interpreted that intent to be in a second. But if you just think of what was the intent here, was it like a space where people could gather and have conversations like the ones that you and I have here on this podcast, maybe, where we talk about these issues because we're interested in them and we're concerned about it as creators? Maybe it's like a meetup kind of vibe, right?
Yeah, it sounds they would have just said that. If it was
I don't think it was going to be a concert full of AI generated music or anything, at least,
No, I guess I'm expecting that there would be some AI, techno optimist bent to an event like that. Because otherwise, call it something different. Call it AI ethics or music ethics or whatever, something to kind of, for lack of a better term, virtue signal what you're hoping to do and who you're hoping will show up at your AI music night.
Right, because they're not framing it as a debate either. It's not like, oh, this side versus this side, we're going to have a discussion. They're not framing it that way either, right?
It not without knowing anything about Paul Slavens, it reads to me a little bit like, I don't know if you've been following, I'm only very, very loosely following like the Rick Beato Suno stuff, where he's not exactly endorsing AI music, but he seems to be, against his better judgment, enamored. He just he keeps talking about it. He's like, well, look at all the stuff you can do. And kind of impressed by it, and I'm sure he likes to talk to his friends about it. That seems to be the angle here. Even if this person is, I'm not, there's nothing to indicate. I'm not going to accuse this person of being a shill or someone who really loves this stuff. But I could certainly see someone having dipped their toes in and being like, I want to talk to people about this.
Yeah. Well, the very same day, they made another post on their Instagram account. And here's what they said. Due to overwhelming sentiment and self-reflection, we have decided to cancel AI Music Night. We made a mistake here. This night was intended to be an open forum to discuss the very real and scary reality of AI in the entertainment business. This was a free event. It was never our intention to promote or profit off of the music. We will meet with Paul to find a way to frame this discussion in a better context. The stance of the club has been and will continue to be an AI-free zone. So there's a lot of comments. I can imagine, because this story reached my feed, it got some virality, and people are weighing in on the original post, which you can still see. And then people also weighed in on this follow-up post, which happened the same day. So there will be no AI music night.
That is... I wish it happened once just so we could know exactly what was going on. That the withdrawal seems to be more backpedaling. To say that this was never intended to be anything other than a discussion does not seem to be the case, right? Then say that in the original post. Or don't cancel it, if that's what you're saying. Everyone's mad, hey, don't perform or encourage AI music. Then they could double down and say, sorry, we should clarify. We were not this event is not about that. It's about whatever, not a debate, or it's about AI skepticism or something. Then keep the event, but instead canceling the event and going, well, that's not what it was going to be. Well, of course, then that you wouldn't have canceled it then.
I think your diagnosis is pretty sharp here, because they also left a comment on the original post, a follow-up comment, again, the same day, but they made a follow-up comment after they canceled it, back on the original post, and they said, this comment was an interstitial between the original post and the cancellations. This is really interesting. So I didn't even realize this. I had flagged this as, they came back and they commented. No, they didn't know that they were going to cancel yet, and they still made a damage control comment on the original post. Here's what they said in that short comment. We share your concerns here. If it were anyone other than Paul Slavens, we would not have agreed to this. Paul has assured us this will be an open conversation about the state of AI music production and what it means for the industry and consumer. All viewpoints are invited to attend and voices will be heard. extra security will be provided. That's what they said in this comment. Now, Paul Slavens is catching a lot of strays here, so we don't have anything against him.
You have no idea what Paul thinks. Yeah. It sounds like maybe Paul was well-intentioned and things kind of got out of hand, that they realized they have to frame it better. But yeah, again, though, if that was your whole thing, and I have heard of people or met people who are thrilled with their ability to like create AI music or AI assisted songwriting or whatever, and it is not as widely despised as you might hope or think. I think there's, probably people in our scene who like using certain tools, and everyone's line of what's ethical and cool and what is not is very different, right?
Yeah. I'm just looking at the top comment here on the original post. What's the discussion to be had? Generative AI should not exist in art. Discussion ends there for me personally. It's the top comment there. Top comment on the cancellation post, very similar. Not sure what discussion Paul thought there was to be had. AI is anti-art and anti-humanity. End of story. So, people say, oh, read the room, they're talking about things like this. But this was not a group. Their clientele were not interested in any sort of discussion.
Yeah. Which, again, I think read the room.
Not surprising.
Not surprising. Yeah, exactly. Especially in like a DIY space. Like, can you imagine if like Redgate had posted and said like, hey, it's AI music night? There would be riots in the street. There'd never be a show there again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a kind of reading the room that I can understand. And there's more. I'm sure there's a lot more comments that are in that same spirit. But those are both top comments, and they say basically the same thing. So, yeah.
Very interesting. I did like the second comment on the original post that just says, "I ain't listening to no clanker music." Clanker being the Zoomer slur for AI or robots in general.
Right. Yeah. I don't think there's much else to add on this. It's just kind of a silly story that I can't believe it reached me.
From Denton. Yeah, that's really funny. All right. Well, I have something to get into a little bit, which is like maybe a bit of a shout out to our spiritual sister podcast, Critical Listening, Max Alper and Liz Pelly, who I definitely, if anyone listens to us and finds any of this stuff interesting, should definitely check out Critical Listening. Talk about lots of the same topics, and Max and Liz are much more experts in the field than Will and myself. But I was listening to their most recent episode, which is an interview with Andy Cush, who is one of the founders of the great blog and newsletter called Hearing Things, founded by many ex-Pitchfork staffers who I think left kind of in the wake of changes at Condé Nast and Pitchfork in general, and started their own kind of independent, worker-owned music publication, which publishes great album reviews and recommendations, and it's definitely worth checking out. One of the things that comes up in that discussion, where they're talking kind of about the quitting streaming, right? Like how when you're surrounded by this like Web 2 stuff, when all the music is on streaming services, you're feeling like you should have to leave Spotify. As an artist, maybe you're feeling like you have to make tough decisions, like we talked about. Is it time for us to take our music off of Spotify? They also talk about Bandcamp. They talk about kind of they're talking about one of Andy's articles called like How to Quit Streaming. An accompanying newsletter about like how to quit streaming as a consumer, which is literally just like unsubscribe from Spotify, which is like, yeah, it is that easy. On the artist side is, I think, more where the discussion went. And that
sounds very sympathetic to where we landed on the subject, which was if you're an artist, leaving is not necessarily the best, like pulling your music is not necessarily the most effective thing, but like leaving as a user is.
Totally. And yeah, it got me thinking as they were talking about some of these alternatives about an idea that like has been, I'm sure I've brought up on this discussion before in this podcast, but that when we are you know, swimming in the water of Web 2, of web platforms, and realizing that maybe we don't, that the water might be poison to us, that I think it is time for many of us and our friends to get quite a lot more technical, quite a lot better at using computers in ways that help us either subvert or work around or, make these platforms work for us. That so much of the friction that has been removed by using these services has taken away kind of our thinking or our need to think about like, what's a server? Where is that server? Like, who's making, who like hosts the servers that, Apple Music or Spotify uses? We're like so far from removed from like the metal of the computers that are making any of this happen that it feels both like impossible to escape from, but also I think most people like wouldn't even know where to start, right? And I think if we want to ever have a hope of alternatives, certainly some of the alternatives they were discussing on this episode of Critical Listening require just like learning a little bit about computers. And I know that feels pretty icky and inconvenient, especially when our sentiment right now is like, this stuff has destroyed everything we stand for. But I'm not saying if you can't beat him, join him. I'm saying we have to like, come up with other alternatives, right? Think of like Subvert or something like that.
Yeah, because you're not saying join anybody else. This is about like yourself. And if you don't try something different, then you're not going to change the ways that you're doing things. Anyways, really, it's not about who else is out there. This is kind of more of an internal question.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of learned and real helplessness that comes with thinking about some of this stuff. I mean, even for example, if you're just a consumer and you're thinking about leaving streaming and you're having to think about like, do I have to like manage an offline music library again? Yeah, that would certainly be an option and it wouldn't be that bad. And if like you can't remember how to like manage a file system on your computer, that's a place to start. All the way down to like, I've talked about the home lab and thinking about like learning to keep a server of your own stuff. That's further down. The other kind of maybe example that relates to other topics we've talked about is in the Digging the Greats series, the iPod series, where he, ditches most of his phone applications and switches to using an iPod. This is all the way back in the first episode of Upsample. We talk about this series. He kind of ends that by getting a kind of refurbished and then jailbroken and modded iPod Classic, and managing his library himself. Has to learn to use some kind of weird software to get the stuff up and running. And he manages to kind of break out of the music streaming paradigm by learning some stuff. And I think, I understand that the sentiment probably among artists right now is like, don't make me touch a computer for like an hour longer than I have to. But again, if we want alternatives and acknowledging that like, unfortunately the internet is where all this stuff is happening and going to probably stay, then I think it's incumbent upon us to like work with each other to like learn some of this stuff, learn some kind of fundamental tech literacy again. And, even just foundational, because maybe one day like the whole internet's going to collapse and we're just going to need to have to like figure out how to store media for our friends. So anyway, that's my soapbox about this topic.
Yeah, I agree with you. I look down the path to you on the subject in a lot of ways because you know a lot more about it than me. Do you have a particular place that you would want to frame that people would start, even if it's different groups of people, like if we're talking to artists or if we're talking to avid fans and listeners and stuff like that. Do you have a particular thing that you think somebody like me, all the way to somebody who maybe doesn't play or isn't as hands-on but is like a big fan, is there a particular kind of area that you want to emphasize when people are learning skills that will help make their experience suck a lot less when they're listening to things like this, that you're like, okay, this is kind of the thing that you should stick your hands in first and get to know? I think that would be an interesting thing to throw out, because then that's something that like I could, if this is something that I'm already doing, I could kind of track where I go with it from here on out.
Totally. Well, I think everyone's on their own journey with, where they're at with their like, functional kind of tech literacy. And even though I have a job in tech, I'm at like level 2 of 30 or something, right? Like I've worked with people and met people that are just like so much more deeply knowledgeable about all this stuff than I am. So, take all of what I'm saying, not as gospel, but just as someone who's also on this journey, but maybe just doing it for a little longer. I guess I would say, especially with someone's feeling that like that kind of suffocation feeling, right? Of okay, I don't like using these tools. Find one thing that you can address for yourself. So I don't know if I've talked too much about this story on the podcast, but when I was going through my whole thing of like, okay, I hadn't listened to music for like 2 years. I realized Spotify was part of that problem, and I kind of wanted to short circuit that a little bit. I found that really the source of the issue was like the recommendation algorithm. You open the Spotify app and you're just going to see the same, 10 albums that you always listen to, or just like the most milquetoast recommendations. I, without really any coding knowledge, began to write myself a little utility that would, when I added something to Spotify, would talk to another app I use, Notion, to put it into a list of the albums I had added to my Spotify library. And, so I could like put a little note in there or remember. And so that was kind of reversed the order, right? That I was writing my own little recommendation, not an actual algorithm, but a list of things I told myself I wanted to listen to. And so that was addressing a frustration that I had. And I know that's probably more advanced than someone wants to go. But that's an example of like something was bugging me about the platform internet. I was like, I bet I can learn a solution for this. And it took me some time, and it sucked sometimes, and it was pretty hard. Hard given that I didn't have the skills at the time. And then it worked, and it was like satisfying and cool. And I, learned something new and was set up for that. I know that's probably not where most folks are at. So like, my example, even of like, if you hate that you're dependent on streaming and you want to go back to like managing a local library, start there, right? Like start getting, I know so much of us, like our laptops are like our browser devices, right? They just exist to connect to the internet, but like, no, there's a file system. Like, they don't need the internet.
Yeah. I famously confessed on this podcast that I do a lot of my listening for rhythm changes straight out of the File Explorer without having a music library app.
That is so crazy to me.
But like, I was going to give myself a place to start by, setting up anything. Like, okay, what should I? And this is a good question for me, where I'm so far down the curve on this that I have a piece of low-hanging fruit that I could grab here. Yeah. What is the music library app that I'm going to use? Can I just set that up? And like with, I have external drives, what is the music app that I should use and put on my desktop home page so that I can quickly access the whole library, including like if I plug it in and it's on an external drive. This is something that I kind of need to address right now, because it is kind of funny that I've been doing it that way.
I would also say, and this is maybe some of this stuff is not, I don't do, so these are suggestions. I have thought about talking to you about self-hosting your Ghost site, right? That's
okay.
This is maybe even further down from where I'm at, right? Where it's like, so for the listeners, like Rhythm Changes is hosted on Ghost, which is a newsletter and blog hosting platform. And they will host it for you, right? That's like software as a service. But
I
you
pay
have
a
the
lot of money for the Rhythm Changes one.
yeah, and you have the option to self-host, which would be probably at your size a little. It wouldn't be that much cheaper, to be honest, and like the operational overhead would be a lot, but like that would be even interesting as a test case, right? To just like see if you could even get the architecture stood up. To say nothing of the emailing, I looked into it today because as I was researching this, because I was like, do I want to propose this for real? The emailing portion would be painful. That's
Okay, I wanna like change. I wanna alter your tack here because I also host currently. I was actually considering switching to something else in a month or two here when it renews. But WilliamChernoff.com is also hosted on Ghost. Stakes are a lot lower there because I send no emails.
yeah.
I'm on the starter plan. So I'm paying like 100 USD instead of 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be the one where if I was going to experiment with Ghost self-hosting, would definitely be over there. I wouldn't dare do it with Rhythm Changes right now. Rhythm Changes is so perfectly mapped onto like what Ghost was designed to offer that I would not upset the apple cart to go self-hosting on. I probably never will, but I do have another site right now where I use Ghost where I potentially could.
Yeah, and like that would be an interesting thing, even just for the learning of it, right? Like, so that would involve still, you'd be cutting out the middleman. You'd be paying Amazon directly to have your stuff hosted on AWS or whatever, Google, or there's no good guy in cloud hosting. You would still need a cloud hosted website. I would not propose setting up a server under your desk, which is one of the labels that they talk about in this critical listening episode. Literally was like, hey, we don't want to like pay Jeff Bezos to do this, so let's just plug in a computer under our desk and host the website for the label off of there. Which
No,
is
don't
like,
do it. Don't do it.
I would not encourage someone to do that if they don't know what they're doing. There's cybersecurity risks with doing that, like as far as hosting a website on your home internet. I would say, be smart and like know your limits. I was gonna say though, as an example of like if you're someone who's maybe using Squarespace to host your website, and you're thinking, you're like you have a music website, like look into what it is like to self-host. And I know we are an anti AI podcast, certainly on the arts front. I would say the ethics of using AI to learn about some of these technical things where they're not copying copyrighted works. These are tools that have read the manual for how to like sign up for an AWS account and can tell you that.
Now we're talking.
That might be a way to kind of shortcut, how you can, and even, with coding, I think coding gets a little bit more ethically dicey where, like I'm sure some tools are trained on someone's code that they don't want, but largely it's tools like Stack Overflow. Again, it's the manuals of tools like Python and JavaScript, that they can just functionally answer, like, here's how you do this in this programming language. And if that is one day going to like enable you to cut ties with a platform, I think we want to all have the tools. The thing is that I want people to consider as they're like, I probably sound nuts as we're talking about this, but like we're so dependent on so many different platforms, and like what happens when, one of the billionaires that we really, really don't like, owns Squarespace or owns every alternative to, Ghost and Substack and whatever, right? Like think about a future where you've got actual autonomy to like do what you want, put your website where you want. That's going to require you to like know some stuff and not have to feel like you're completely chained to these platforms.
To when it has the Twitter X moment, you would say, and not just about autonomy, but like about, whether or not you feel compromised in your values or whatever by using the platform, which is a big deal with Spotify right now for a lot of people, and has been a big deal with X and Twitter since 2022. We're saying that this could be a theme that kind of keeps
Yeah.
coming up to some extent. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what autonomy means, more so than like whatever your aim behind it is. It's about where you sit in relation to the other players and whether or
Yeah.
not you feel like they suck too much, so you don't want to associate with them.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Dryhurst, who we've maybe talked about a tiny bit, has talked a lot about platform risk. Matt Dryhurst is Holly Herndon's partner, and kind of in the art and technology space. I think he's a lot more. Yeah, they're not like pro AI, but they use AI like boutique AI tools that they make themselves. Holly and Matt. In the past, he talked a lot about platform risk, that artists have to be very careful about, like, when SoundCloud kind of started not being like a great user experience, and so many artists were like, well, I don't know where to go because like my whole audience is here. Or, Instagram's a great example now, where people are like really need Instagram so that they can like get their stuff seen by people. That's platform risk, right? So I think we are in a post-platform internet. It's going to be a lot more modular. I would love to see like groups of friends with like file sharing servers sharing their like works in progress with each other, this type of thing. That's maybe too utopian, but like I think that I'm like illustrating my point of it's time to maybe like take some baby steps to like learn some stuff about this.
Yeah, my first one is going from raw dog in the file explorer to a music library app on my own computer. And then, yeah, there's a few other ideas that are germinating from our conversation today, like the self-hosting, perhaps as an experiment. I would almost rather for WilliamChernoff.com to go Wolfpack style and just have a plain text homepage, with have you ever been to their website? You know what I'm talking about?
I've seen a few. There's actually a good do they talk about that on this episode of
and this is in the Patreon, right, that you're hearing it? Like, it isn't on the feed, because I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, it's probably not quite. It's probably not quite out yet.
Yeah.
So I am a patron of Critical Listening, so I heard it on Monday or whenever it came out. But yeah, it'll
I wonder if they'll drop it on the same day that we drop this on Friday.
They might. Yeah, they certainly might. So definitely check out that episode. Keep those things in mind. Be curious. But they mentioned that there's actually a tool that you can use to make these HTML kind of self-hosted websites. That's like, I think, an open source, cool, easy way to do it.
Yeah, because it's like hosting, right? Even for me, because like I know how to format it basically, and if I don't, like you said, I could use AI to do the laundry, and I could figure out the formatting.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, if it's the deployment of it, I'll just have to pick a solution, right? So that's like my second baby step: File Explorer, and then like make my William Chernoff website a Wolfpack site at whatever small cost,
Yeah, totally. Make some little. I'm sure that traffic-wise, you only need like an Amazon EC2, the T2 Micro Linux box, and then you can, learn how to host that safely. And yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to close in the music space with a music story here?
Absolutely.
All right. Are you familiar with this artist, JP Saxe? He's a Canadian artist who was nominated for Song of the Year Grammy. So, ascended to some pretty lofty heights.
Wow.
I think people would consider him a one-hit wonder for his song If the World Was Ending. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar. I did check out this article earlier today, but I have not listened to the music yet.
Okay, I'm going to throw this out there now too, in case you are listening and you can help me. I think I have played a gig with this person once, a long time ago. I'm pretty sure he was playing keys or piano or something, and we were in the same band backing up somebody. And I don't know, because he's not from Vancouver, so but I'm pretty sure I have played a gig with this guy. So if I can figure that out at some point, who that might have been, when he might have been in Vancouver in the early 2010s, when I was a teenager and I was just starting out, and he's a couple of years older than you and I. So I have a random feeling that I played a gig with this guy back in the day. So I'm trying to figure that out, but I haven't.
Wow. All right.
This is before his solo career what it is today. That's for certain. And I'm not in touch with him at all. So yeah, I'm throwing that out into the world. Let's see if I can track that down. But anyways, on July 28th, JP Saxe took to his own Instagram with the video, and the crux of what he said was, quote, "If I don't sell 20 or so thousand tickets to my tour in the next 48 hours, it's going to be canceled." Now, he said on this tour, he was going to play a bunch of what he said were 2 or 3K cap venues. So, what is the comparison? That is larger than the Commodore here in Vancouver, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's not an arena. But 2 or 3 thousand cap venues. Actually, I think that's a size that is kind of rare here. I would say, that's what is that? The
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth Theater,
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. The
So,
Chan Center, I don't think is quite that big, but yeah, these were the kinds of venues that he was in, and he framed it as, okay, I'm kind of over my skis here, and he ends this short video after stating those facts, which got a lot of attention.
mhm.
That he said what he wanted to do as an artist was, quote, connect deeply, not widely, at the end of the day. So
Right.
he was like, okay, this is where I'm at. I am going to speak up about this because my situation's pretty dire. I could be ashamed of it, not say anything, but I'm going to say something, probably knowing that it was going to get a lot of attention, to be
Yeah.
fair. And saying that, as an artist, his mission is undeterred because he does want to connect personally with people as a singer-songwriter. And so that's where he was at.
Yeah.
Now, on August 1st, 4 days later, he puts up another video and he says, well, thank you for all the response. We have sold quite a few extra tickets. He said a few thousand, I think, in the video.
Sweet.
And however, he says that does not mean the tour is going to be saved. They are canceling the tour. And so at this point, he also contributes an article to Variety, which had covered his original video. And he expands on the decision to cancel the tour, where, he talks about how his team is like, okay, this is what we have to do. You are going to get a chance to try again. And JP Saxe frames this thing of what he labels as the facade of success. And he ties that into how typically people would expect you to come up with excuses so that you don't have to speak up the way that he originally did. And you'd say due to unforeseen circumstances,
Sure.
or, things like COVID or environmental factors. And, that he claims that the industry would never want you to speak up the way that he did and be honest and truthful about the difficulty of the situation, and of low performance and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so he is like, I am against this facade of success. I'm cutting through it. I'm going straight to you. And then he starts a Substack as well. And in the Substack, he mentions, quote, just how adamantly advised I was to not say anything about the ticket struggles to my audience. And so he's positioning himself as, okay, I'm the artist who, I'm going to be honest about the fact that I was in venues that were too big for me and I'm over my skis, and I am going to come out from this stronger, and thank you all for rallying behind me and against the industry and the ways that it pushes us to, aim massive to try and juice profits and then make excuses when you don't do it. And of course, he's not the only artist who's had tour troubles. The Black Keys is the first one I thought of. I will link to another article where they mention several others. That's kind of a good backgrounder from Chartmetric, the service that lets you view streaming data and stuff. They have a writer on their blog who put up a good piece about that I checked out. But yeah, JP Saxe's tour is not happening. He is, however, playing at Rifflandia over in Victoria on September 13th. That is the only tour date that is currently listed upcoming on his website.
Man, that is a tough story. I like that he was upfront that it was ticket sales. I think there's no shame in that, because like if the Black Keys have had to like cancel an arena tour, it's not just you. You know what I mean? It's not just that like, oh, people don't like your music, dude. Like that's not it, right? I think everyone's having a harder time. It sounds like maybe they shot pretty, like Queen E is like big artists, like, Father John Misty, like generational international indie artists played the Queen, like it's that 2,000, 3,000 cap. And maybe that was lofty to book, and that maybe wasn't even his choice necessarily. It could have been his management or his team that ran some early numbers and thought they could pull that off. But I think it's cool to aim high, and occasionally you don't hit, and it's very it's like humble and cool to say like, all right, it's not the last one. but to be transparent about that is neat.
So I want to cut on both sides here, and I will reference a previous thing that I wrote at Rhythm Changes once, where I wrote about another Canadian artist who ended up on a tour over his skis, Cadence Weapon, Raleigh Pemberton, when I wrote about reading his autobiography
Right.
at Rhythm Changes for a Subscriber Friday in, what year was this? In fall of 2022. Wow, so quite a while ago now. I looked at some comments that he made in an article for Toronto Life, and I am going to quote from myself, but also from what he wrote. So this is what he wrote. Last fall, after I won the 2021 Polaris Prize for my album Parallel World, I went on a 12-date US tour. My overall expenses for a relatively bare bones tour were like about $21,000. Even with the $7,000 in tour support funding I'd received, I'd lost about $2,000. That's what he said about the situation. Timing is uncanny. He won Polaris in the same year that his fellow Canadian JP Saxe got the Grammy nomination. So
Whoa.
that's interesting. He's a little older though, is Cadence Weapon, I guess.
Yeah.
But then I looked at that and I was like, well, okay, this is probably a bad management decision, and he probably shouldn't have been out there unless he was willing to take the L, because you know, if you did the equation on the numbers he gives and you try and figure out how much he made on the tour to end up losing $2,000 based on the other figures he gave, you know, it comes out as like, and he said it was like a 12 show tour. It comes out as he's like making $1,000 a show, which, you know, if I told you that you're a Polaris winning artist, you're going to go out and you're going to make $1,000 per show in the US, you know, you're going to lose money on its face. Like there's no doubt about it. That's just not enough. I remember the same thing when the band Wednesday complained about how they like toured themselves out to South by Southwest and came back and they only made this much. And it's like, well, of course you lost money on that because you're not making money along the way. Like it will not math, right? So it's like, and I think the Black Keys fired their management after that tour busted. And I think there's a reason for that. It's because they shouldn't have been put in this position. And, you know, management is a partnership. They work for the artist, basically. But it is a partnership in decision making between the management and the artist. And they probably shouldn't have been out there if that's what the picture was looking like. Somebody should have been able to pull the plug. Now, why don't they? Well, it's because there are other players, like the label especially, who are like, you got to get out there so that we can sell our product and swing for the fences, because we've spent a lot of money on this music, on marketing it and recording it. And so we have to try. And the label is not going to have to foot the bill if you fail out there on the road so much as the artists and the management are. So maybe artists and management have a hard time pushing back on, you know, label and agent and other players, and are like, we're not actually ready for this. And that's the same force that JP is saying, oh, as an artist, there's like, you know, I think we could both decry all this dumb stuff about how people think they have to appear so successful all the time and like kind of manifest it in that way, or like fake it till you make it as an artist by like trying to appear perfect and successful. That kind of artist branding thing, I think we both find really distasteful. But there's an industry side to it as well, where the industry players don't have the incentives to take the step back. Instead, they will push each other into like escalating the whole thing until where it becomes very, very risky, or where like somebody's going to be holding the bag for one of these players to get what they want, like the label having the artist be on a big prominent tour, etc. You know, the management kind of driving the horse a little bit too hard, and like, you know, the artist not being happy or whatnot. There's all kinds of different ways that this can play out. But I think like what JP is talking about, he feels the pressure to be like, and what he's resisting against. I think all the different players on his team or on a professional artist team, they also encounter that pressure at different times.
Yes. It kind of brings to mind the like, I never lived in the suburbs, but how I imagine the sort of suburban keeping up with the Joneses in some parts of the States, where then you look at like the household debt of the area and you're like, oh my goodness, like nobody can afford this lifestyle with the like three kids, a huge SUV and a sports car and a huge McMansion in the burbs outside of wherever, Phoenix. And yet there's just like, well, if that artist, like if many artists are taking the L or barely scraping by on these tours, and there's this, facade of success that you have to keep up so that it still looks like you're winning. Because, you can think of another way this could have gone if they had caught this early enough or corrected early enough, is like, and the variety piece talks about this a little bit, is some artists have to just book smaller venues. And like, I think many cities have a thing like Vancouver, MRG will start you at the Fox or the Hollywood. And then if you sell out, it's an easy bump up to go to the Commodore or the Vogue or something. I forget which of the two is the one that they bump up from the Hollywood theater to. But like, start small. And then if you sell out, that's a really good problem to have. What's not good is the other side where you aim too high and you have to realize like, okay, no, we can only sell 800 tickets to a 2,000 cap show.
Okay, tonight, Infidels Jazz, one of my clients, is presenting Isabel Leong's Ghibli Jazz Orchestra at the Hollywood Theater. 2 shows.
Wow.
It's probably over 1,000 sales.
Yeah.
3 years ago, they presented the band at Frankie's After Dark, which is a show at 11 p.m. with a capacity of less than 100.
Yeah.
They had lines around the block. Video game shows are a popular thing now. They've gotten more so in the ensuing years between now and then.
Yeah.
He presented them again at the Pearl, they've done a few shows, kind of annual shows, but they played at the Pearl, they did 2 shows there. That's a few hundred seats. So, when you're local and when you're small and when you got a local promoter who can like know somebody for years and kind of move you through different houses, that's how you can have like a jazz big band selling 1,000 tickets.
Yeah.
You do not like go and book that big band a tour. I think this question might come up for her because she's like now, so funnily enough, like she's like the leader of the most popular jazz band in the scene in a sense, right? But like you do not look at that and you're like, okay, we're gonna book this band at like every 600 to 1,200 seat theater in like major Canadian cities, or
right.
If you do, somebody's got to be pumping the brakes on that because you're gonna have to spend so much on marketing to even just fill some of those seats. And it's not gonna go well. I think it's pretty obvious when we talk about that in terms of like a 18-piece jazz big band. But like if you're a singer songwriter and you've not won a Grammy, but you were nominated for like one of the major Grammys, I think it's pretty hard for somebody to push back in that way. It's like, why? And if you describe the situation to normies, they would be surprised, right? They'd be like, what do you mean the Black Keys fired their management because their tour busted? What do you mean this guy who almost won a major Grammy can't sell 2,000 or 3,000 tickets? The perception is not with the reality on the ground. So there's so many interesting kind of social factors that I get exposed to every day in my work that I think manifest in this particular story, which is why I found it so fascinating, and that it actually kind of happened. And he did rally support. The tour got canceled. Now he kind of has some attention at his back, and he ends his variety piece by kind of talking about where he hopes to go from here. He says, so if I really believe, which I do, that I'm going to sell out arenas someday, then I also have to believe in knowing how much better it'll feel when I get there, knowing I can tell the story about that one time in the fall of 2025 when, despite the support of a few thousand beautiful strangers on the internet, I had to cancel my whole tour. That's how he ends the piece.
Yeah.
So he's using it to step into a narrative about where he's going next, which is what he has to do. It's like that's the work of the artist pretty much in distilled, really. So I think he is viewing it exactly as you should be viewing it. It's cool that he's gotten the chance to speak about this. We're probably going to keep seeing this because for a variety of reasons, like, there actually aren't that many right-sized venues, and if they're not available when you're going on tour, then you can't play them. There's all kinds of reasons why this will continue to happen, and we'll see it again.
Yeah, I would say props to JP for being transparent about it. That sucks, and sounds like he's taking the right thing of turning a page and just carrying on. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and I will also mention that the chart metric article that I'm linking called Why Some Artists Are Rethinking Touring, they also mention the ticket levy, which is another recurring
Right.
subject about, how you can allow there to be more venues that are favorable for people on tour. Yeah, it's a subject that we will turn to. We will see where the general economic conditions are going, how that plays into that. Yeah, the Canada-US relations side of it, there's
Yep.
a lot going on in that space.
100%. Well, very good stuff. Good all arounder of an episode. Do you have a recommendation for the folks at home?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend an album. It is called Different Strokes for Different Folks, and it came out in early July, and it is by the guitarist Charlie Hunter, who is known for like playing guitars with bass strings and like octave downs and like accompanying himself and making like beat music, but like coming out of jazz. And Ella Feingold, who's another guitarist that I'm not as familiar with her, but this is like a guitarist producer duo album. It's not just beat music, it also has some touches of like improv and experimental rock and all that other kind of stuff that I like. So I don't think this is going to be like one of my top 10 albums of the year or anything, but I've been digging it, so I'm going to recommend it. Different Strokes, Different Folks, Charlie Hunter and Ella Feingold.
Charlie Hunter, perhaps best known for his work on D'Angelo's Voodoo.
Yep.
I got to check that out. I love Charlie Hunter. Cool. My recommendation is a new album by the artist Dijon, who had I think my favorite album of 2021, absolutely. And then his new album is called Baby, and it's very good. It's alternative R&B. I really liked Absolutely, which kind of had it was like alt R&B with some like pedal steel and stuff. This album's a lot more like brash and noisy and experimental as far as the timbres being used and some of the production, and lots of like chops in and out of their samples and whatnot. It's great. His voice is great. His songwriting is great. It's got some very nostalgic vibes. Dijon also worked on previous recommendation, the Justin Bieber Swag album.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, or if Mike Gordon McGee, who had that album, big album, 2-star in the Dream Police last year. McGee, I believe, is also on this Dijon album. So if you like the kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, like Los Angeles cool kid indie sound, because it's kind of a very specific niche of the genre right now, but it's good.
Yeah, that's a good one. I will check it out. It makes me think of, I didn't go, but as of when this comes out, last night there would have been a show at Tyrant Studios by this band called Now What, which is a project by this local keyboardist Justin Juan, who really likes all the people that you just mentioned. He plays jazz keys, plays as a session player with different people, but he is all over stuff like this, and he had a jazz show where he was playing this kind of music. So there are people locally who dig this and who play music kind of like this. I'm not necessarily one of them, but I see them out there. So, and I've listened to it, and you are a proponent of it right now, so I'll keep listening to it.
Awesome. Yeah, check it out. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, on this episode, I have enjoyed an excellent aroma coming from the kitchen, which is behind me, because I have been roasting some beef in a Dutch oven. I'm doing like a braised blade steak, so I'm excited. I will report back on how that's gone, but it smells pretty darn good, so I'm gonna crack that open very shortly here.
I am so jealous. I have a takeout downstairs that I'm going to enjoy and tidy up my kitchen. Pretty boring night, but pleasure talking to you as always, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Catch you on the next one.